I never thought my marriage would end like this. 3 years together. 1 year married. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. We had our little routines, Saturday morning coffee runs, late-night movie marathons, the way he'd reach for my hand under the table at dinner parties, like we had some secret only we understood. And then, one random afternoon, his past showed up on our doorstep. I was the one who answered the door. The moment I saw her, my stomach dropped. Lauren. I recognized her immediately, even though I'd only ever seen her in old photos and heard about her in passing. She was thinner than I expected. Her long auburn hair was still as perfect as ever, her makeup effortless. But there was something else, something in the way she stood, her hands gripping the strap of her purse a little too tightly. "Hi," she said, offering a small, polite smile. "I know this is unexpected, but I really need to talk to Josh. And you." I should have slammed the door in her face. But instead, I found myself stepping aside. Josh was in the kitchen when I called for him. His voice was casual at first, distracted. "Who is it?" Then he walked into the room and saw her. His entire body tensed. His jaw tightened, his grip on his coffee mug going white-knuckled. "Lauren." For a moment, no one spoke. Then she exhaled, her shoulders dropping slightly. "Hey, Josh." I folded my arms across my chest, watching them carefully. Josh's voice was clipped. "What are you doing here?" Lauren hesitated, glancing at me before looking back at him. "Can we sit down?" Josh didn't move. "Just say whatever you need to say." She nodded once, like she'd expected that response. Then, without any warning, she dropped the bomb. "I have ALS." The words hung in the air, too heavy to ignore. Josh blinked. I felt the breath catch in my throat. "What?" he said, his voice quieter now. She took a slow breath. "I was diagnosed a few months ago. It's progressing fast." I expected her to sound sad, but she didn't. She sounded resigned. Matter of fact. Josh set his coffee down on the counter, staring at her. "Lauren, I..." He trailed off, shaking his head like he was still processing the words. I should have said something. Maybe asked how she was handling it, if she had support. But before I could, she kept going. "I need a favor," she said. A big one. Something about the way she said it sent a chill down my spine. Josh's brows pulled together. "What kind of favor?" She licked her lips, hesitating. Then, "I want to have a baby. And I want you to be the father." For a second, I thought I misheard her. Then I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Excuse me." Lauren turned to me, her expression eerily calm. "I've wanted a child for a long time. I even started looking into sperm donors before my diagnosis. But after everything, I realized I don't want just anyone. I want someone I trust. Someone I know would be a good father." Josh didn't speak. Lauren's eyes softened. "I want it to be you." I felt my stomach twist. This had to be a joke. I turned to Josh, waiting for him to shut this down, to tell her absolutely not and show her the door. But he didn't. He just sat there, silent, processing. And then, after what felt like an eternity, he said, I don't know." My head snapped toward him so fast my neck almost cracked. "You don't know?" His hands balled into fists on his lap. "I mean, this is huge, and she's..." "No," I cut him off, my voice rising. "This isn't huge. This is insane." I turned back to Lauren, my heart pounding. "You haven't spoken to him in years. You dragged him through hell during your divorce. And now, out of nowhere, you want him to give you a baby." She didn't flinch. "I know it sounds crazy, but I'm running out of time. I don't want to leave this world without knowing I had someone to carry on." Josh ran a hand down his face. "Lauren, I need to think." "Think? Think?" I stared at him, my blood turning ice cold. "You can't be serious," I whispered. Josh didn't look at me. Instead, he turned to Lauren and said, "Just give me some time." Lauren nodded, standing up. "Of course. Take all the time you need." Then, before she left, she turned to me and said, "I know this is a lot. I hope you can try to understand." And just like that, she was gone. The second the door clicked shut, I turned to Josh, barely able to contain the rage bubbling inside me. "Tell me you just said that to get her out of here," I demanded. Josh exhaled slowly. "I don't know, okay? I need to wrap my head around this." I let out a sharp breath, shaking my head. "You need to wrap your head around this?" My voice cracked. "Josh, this isn't something you think about. You either tell her no, or you lose me." His eyes widened. "Lose you?" "Yes," I hissed. "Because the fact that you didn't immediately say no tells me everything I need to know." His jaw clenched. "That's not fair." No, what's not fair is my husband sitting here considering having a baby with his ex-wife while I'm standing right in front of him. Josh scrubbed a hand over his face, looking exhausted. Can we just not do this right now? I laughed bitterly. Oh, I'm so sorry this conversation is inconvenient for you. Silence stretched between us. Then, quietly, Josh said, I just don't want to make the wrong choice. A lump rose in my throat. You already did. I turned away, grabbed my coat, and walked out the door. And this time, I didn't look back. I spent the night at my parents' house, curled up in my childhood bed, staring at the ceiling. The walls were still covered in the same faded posters from high school, little remnants of a life that felt so far away now. I wished I could go back to being the girl, the one who thought love was simple, who believed that when someone chose you, they'd never unchoose you. My phone vibrated on the nightstand. I didn't have to check to know who it was. Josh had been calling me nonstop since I left. I ignored every single one. I wasn't ready to hear his voice. Not when the last thing he'd said to me was I don't want to make the wrong choice. Like choosing me wasn't the obvious answer. By morning, my anger had settled into something heavier. A dull, aching kind of numbness. My mom must have sensed it because she placed a cup of coffee in front of me without a word and sat down across from me at the kitchen table. She didn't ask what happened. She just waited. And eventually, the words spilled out. She asked him to have a baby with her, I said quietly, staring into my coffee. And instead of saying no, he said he'd think about it. My mom inhaled sharply. Are you serious? I laughed, but it came out hollow. Wish I wasn't. She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. Honey, that's not okay. I swallowed past the lump in my throat. I know. Do you think he'll actually do it? That was the thing. I didn't know. And that terrified me. I don't even know who he is anymore, I admitted. Because the Josh I married wouldn't have hesitated. My mom's grip tightened. Then maybe you just got your answer. I hated how much that hurt. Because deep down, I knew she was right. Josh's hesitation was my answer. Later that afternoon, after another round of ignored calls, he finally sent a text. Josh, please, just talk to me. Can we meet? I stared at my screen, my stomach twisting. I didn't want to see him. Didn't want to look into his eyes and wonder if he'd already made up his mind, if he was just meeting me to soften the blow. But some sick part of me needed to know. So I typed back. Me? Fine. 1 hour. Coffee shop. The same one where I had walked out on him the night before. When I arrived, he was already there, sitting at a corner table, his hands wrapped around a coffee cup like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. His knee bounced under the table. He only did that when he was nervous. I slid into the seat across from him. Talk, I said flatly. He exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. I screwed up. I let out a sharp breath. No kidding. I didn't know how to react, he admitted. Lauren and I, we have history. And hearing that she's sick, he broke off, shaking his head. It messed with my head, okay? I folded my arms. And your first instinct was to consider giving her a baby? Josh flinched. I know how it sounds. Do you? I narrowed my eyes. Because it sounds like you still have feelings for her. His head snapped up. I don't. I raised an eyebrow. I don't, he repeated, more desperate this time. This isn't about that. Then what is it about? My voice cracked. Because, Josh, I was right there. You had a choice. And instead of choosing me, my breath hitched. You hesitated. Josh's face crumpled. I didn't mean to, he said, his voice quiet. But you did. Silence. I stared at him, my heart pounding. Do you want to do this? Josh exhaled slowly, his hands tightening around his coffee cup. And then, so quietly I almost didn't hear it. I don't know. Something inside me broke. I pushed back my chair. Josh's eyes widened. Wait. I stood up, shaking my head. If you really loved me, there wouldn't be an, I don't know. Please, don't go, he whispered. But I was already walking away. And this time, I didn't stop. I told myself I was done. That there was nothing left to say. That if Josh didn't know by now that he'd lost me, he never would. And yet, as I lay awake in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't stop replaying our conversation. The way his voice cracked when he said I don't know. The way his hands shook around his coffee cup. The way I had wanted him to stop me when I walked away. But he hadn't. And wasn't that my answer, too? A few days passed. Josh stopped calling. Stopped texting. The silence should have been a relief, but instead, it settled in my chest like a weight I couldn't shake. Then, one night, my phone buzzed with a message from a mutual friend. I thought you should see this. Attached was a screenshot. It was a photo of Josh and Lauren, sitting together at a dimly lit restaurant. Her hand rested lightly on his arm. His head was tilted toward her, an almost smile on his lips. The caption read, "Old friends reconnecting." I felt my stomach drop. I stared at the screen for a long time, my fingers gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles ached. After everything, after the way he had begged me not to leave, he was already with her? I wanted to throw my phone across the room. Instead, I took a deep breath, then another. And then, with hands that only shook a little, I texted back. "Thanks for letting me know." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, staring at my reflection in the dark window, and let the truth sink in. Josh wasn't torn. Josh wasn't struggling with some impossible decision. Josh had chosen. And he hadn't chosen me. I didn't text him. I didn't call. I wanted to. I wanted to send him the screenshot and ask, was it worth it? Was throwing away our marriage worth sitting across from her in some dimly lit restaurant like nothing happened? But I already knew the answer. Josh had made his choice. So I made mine. I went back to our house while I knew he'd be at work. Walking through the front door felt strange, like stepping into a life that wasn't mine anymore. Everything looked the same. Our framed wedding photos still hung on the wall. My favorite blanket was draped over the couch. His shoes were by the door where he always left them, even though I'd told him 1,000 times to put them away. For a split second, I could almost pretend that he'd come home soon, wrapping his arms around me from behind, kissing my temple like he always used to. But then I noticed the small things. A half-empty coffee cup in the sink, that wasn't mine. A faint trace of perfume in the air, one I didn't wear. A throw pillow on the couch that had been moved, like someone else had been sitting there. Lauren had already been here. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to keep moving. I packed quickly, efficiently. Not because I was in a hurry, Josh wouldn't be home for hours, but because I couldn't be here any longer than necessary. I had just zipped up my last suitcase when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I frowned, then opened the message. "Hey, I just wanted to say I'm sorry for all the trouble I caused. That was never my intention." I froze. Then another message came through. "But honestly, I think you overreacted. If you really loved Josh, you would have trusted him. Instead, you made him feel guilty for trying to do something good." I gripped my phone so tightly my fingers ached. Then, the final blow. "I hope one day you understand. Josh deserves better. Lauren." I exhaled slowly, my body trembling. I could have responded. Could have unleashed months' worth of anger in one long, scathing message. But that's what she wanted. A reaction. Instead, I blocked her number, threw my phone onto the couch, and sat down, pressing the heels of my hands against my eyes. I had spent so much time mourning my marriage, mourning Josh. But now? No, I wasn't sad. I was furious. Not just at Lauren. Not just at Josh. At myself. Forever believing he was the kind of man who would have fought for me. I didn't cry. Not when I packed the last of my things. Not when I loaded my suitcases into my car. Not even when I took one final look around the house that was supposed to be ours forever. I had wasted enough tears on Josh. I left my key on the kitchen counter. No note. No goodbye. He didn't deserve one. And then, I walked out of that house and out of his life for good. For the first time in weeks, I felt light. Not happy. Not okay. But lighter. I stayed at my parents' house for a while, trying to piece myself back together. Some days were easier than others. Some nights, I still reached for my phone, instinctively wanting to text Josh about something stupid before I remembered he wasn't mine to text anymore. I told myself I was moving on. Then, 2 months later, I got the news. Lauren was pregnant. I found out the way everyone else did, through social media. A post on her profile, a carefully curated photo of her and Josh standing together, her hand resting on her barely there bump. The caption? "Some miracles take time." I wanted to throw my phone. Not because I was surprised, God, nothing they did could surprise me anymore. But because it felt like a slap in the face. Like she wanted me to see it. And maybe she did. I could already hear the whispers. She couldn't give him a baby, so he found someone who could. I refused to give her the reaction she wanted. I didn't text Josh. Didn't message Lauren. Didn't ask how long they'd been trying, or if he'd ever really hesitated at all. Instead, I blocked them both. And just like that, they were gone. The next few months weren't easy. Healing never is. But little by little, I started feeling like me again. I went back to work. Went out with friends. Signed up for a gym membership I actually used. I even started seeing someone new. Nothing serious, nothing fast, but for the first time in a long time, I felt something other than anger, other than grief. One evening, I was sitting in a quiet coffee shop, flipping through a book, when my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I hesitated, then opened the message. Josh, can we talk? I stared at the screen, my heartbeat steady. Months ago, I would have dropped everything. Months ago, I would have run straight back into the fire, begging for an explanation that would make it all make sense. But now? Now, I just laughed. And then, I deleted the message.